Okay, so this next portion of the chapter talks about digital certificates. And so we're going to take a look at digital certificates. We'll look at certificate authorities and some certificate life cycles. So when you think about a digital certificate, the idea would be that we have a Windows box. With my Windows box, I have the ability to go ahead and create a set of digital certificates for our employees. Very easy to set this up. So when I used to teach the Microsoft classes, we would set it up for digital certificates very easily. So when we think about the public key certificates, it's got several different pieces of information that are on there that are important to us. Probably the most important one is your dates. When did the certificate start becoming valid? When did it end its validity date? So there's a couple other things there. It uses the PKS 509 as the standard that we use. We'll see that coming up a little bit later on. But it has in there our public key, who the owner of the certificate is, some additional information. The digital signature is attesting to authenticity. This is not to be confused with a digital signature. The digital signature provides authenticity of the message. The certificate provides the identity of the user and the system. So the idea would be that Microsoft is going to send me a certificate, because what I'm going to end up doing is I've got the root certificate authority that's going to be granting me my digital certificate. I'm at the end user here. I'm moving up the ladder to the intermediate certificate authority. Generally, the intermediate certificate authority is going to be something like my registration authority. So I go to the RA to say, hey, you know what? I need a certificate. Oh, we've got all your information, Eric. We can go ahead and pass that on up to the CA. The CA is going to then issue my certificate down to the intermediate certificate authority or the registration authority, who's then going to pass this on to me. They're going to send me two things. What two things do they send me? Public and private key pair. What do I do with the private key? I store it and keep it private. What do I do with my public key? I share that with everybody else. Can you go to the root certificate, my root certificate, and say, can I get Eric's public key? Yes, you can. If you go right to the CA, does that validate and verify that I am who I say I am? Because they're the one who issued my certificate. You can go to them to verify that I am who I say I am. So that's one of the reasons that we go up to the root certificate, or better yet, to the registration authority. They can do the same thing. Now here's the thing. The root certificate is there to really pass out certificates. Can we go ahead and disconnect, take offline the certificate authority after it's passed out the certificates? Absolutely. Because if I were to attack as a hacker, if I were to attack your root CA, would I then have all of the public and private key pairs out there that have been issued? Absolutely. So this is one of the reasons that we want to do this, is for security, take it offline, whereas the intermediate certificate authority is just a way station to pass that information on through. It'll keep a copy of your public certificate, but not your private one. So that you'd be the only one, you and the root CA would be the only ones that have copies of that. As an end user, I have to trust the CA because they've given me my certificate. If the same CA gave you your certificate, does that mean, since we both trust the same CA, that we can trust each other transitively? Yes, we can. This is where we build this web of trust. If we're all trusting the same CA, then we can trust each other. That's how it's built. That's the web of trust and how it's built. So when we take a look at the format that we have for the certificate authority, this would be one of the ways that we can take a look at it. This would be on a Windows box itself. So when you're taking a look at it, what you've got in this is it's telling me about the trust, the Google Internet Authority, the validity dates, not before, not after, subject information about the subject, who you are. So it's giving me a lot of information about the certificate, and it also then gives me your public key is something else that's shared on this. So what we can end up seeing is the public key on this. We have a couple different ways and methods that we can encode your certificates. So these are just some of the ways that different companies and different entities are going to go ahead and encode and store your information. So one of them is going to be the distinguished encoding rules that we've got. Privacy enhanced email was originally developed for the military. So PEM was something that was used by the military. If you're using an Apache web server, you can use the CER, which is an individual certificate that's used by Apache. If we're going to be doing some personal information exchange, we can use the P12. We have the PFX, which is the predecessor of the PKCS number 12. We also have the cryptographic message syntax standard, which is the PCKS number 7. So this would just be a way that we encode the messages going back and forth. When we think about the CA is what's signing and or revoking my certificate. Why would we want to revoke a certificate? They are no longer in the need to know, so we can go ahead and revoke your certificate. It has expired. It's hit that end of usefulness date, therefore it goes into the certificate revocation list. How about if we've got somebody who has been fired? I would hope that we're going to get rid of them and get rid of their certificate. Let's say that we have an employee who might have done some questionable things at the office. Would we revoke their certificate, or would we put their certificate on hold while we send them on vacation? If I revoke it, can I ever unrevoke it? No, you cannot. So I'm going to put it on hold while they're on vacation. We're going to do a little investigation and see if they've actually been stealing from us. If everything's okay, we're just going to take it off hold and we're going to bring them back in. So when we take a look at the certificates themselves, we want the CA to be the one that's revoking them, but we can also go in ourselves and revoke that certificate. So the CA has to show itself as being trustworthy. Many times we can go hire a third party, such as VeriSign. There's a company called Baltimore Entrust. GoDaddy is also a certificate authority. So these are some of the companies that we can work with. So when we think about that root certificate, we can get the out-of-band distribution. In other words, we're not going to send it over the same wire that you're getting it. We can go ahead and send it through some other means to get it to you, put it on a USB and hand it to you that way. So that's what they mean by an out-of-band distribution. The way that we set up the certificates can be different ways. We have limited purpose. We only want you to use this certificate for a certain thing. We're validating your emails, that's it. Could be multi-domain. It could be that I've got www.microsoft.com. I've got mail.microsoft.com. I've got updates.microsoft.com. I have all these different domains, all owned by Microsoft. I can go ahead and create one CA that's going to go ahead and give it to all of those. A wildcard would do the same thing. It would just basically say, let's go ahead and give this to all of these subsidiaries that we have. Could be extended validation. We want to go ahead and extend out that validation date, so we're going to go ahead and pass that expiration date up a little bit. As we begin generating your certificate, the applicant's going to generate a key pair, keeping the private key secret. The applicant presents the public key to the CSR, then passes it up to the certificate authority. So this is the certificate request that we've got going up. So the CA verifies the identity of the applicant according to its standards that it has. It's going to go ahead and then sign your certificate, disseminate your certificate, and say, here you go. Here's your public and private key pair now from our certificate. So we have a couple ways of setting up our certificates. Again, we've got that limited purpose. We can sit there and say, hey, this is the only reason that we have this certificate here. It could be that we're setting up the certificates for your emails. If you were to download some files from the internet, could the internet provider or the company that you're getting this from come back and do code signing to say, yes, this is valid, it's coming from our system, and it's valid code that's coming down to you? Yeah, that's an easy way for us to make sure that we are getting the proper certificate coming down. Now, I thought it was interesting. My very first day of flying out to Italy to do a class, they sent me this little request that I had to go in and do the cybersecurity training before I left. And the first thing that popped up on my screen when I clicked on the link was this pink bar across the top of my screen. And it said, the certificate is not valid. And I looked at this and I went, if I click on this, this might be the test. If I click on this, they're not going to let me go to Italy. And I was going, because with code signing, it's going to be green across the top that says this is valid code. So I'm looking at this going, is the military messing with me? And then I remember the email said that it was going to take 2 hours to do this. So I went, it must be good. So I went and clicked on it and popped me in the 2-hour little quiz I had to take. So with code signing, what we're doing is we're sending some code down to you, and we're just going to go ahead and put that code up there and say this is valid code coming from the manufacturer. So this would be one of the things that we could do. So another certificate type is SANS. We also have the wildcard and the extended validation. So the wildcard again and SAN can be used for multiple things at the same time. The extended validation, we can go ahead and extend that validation period that you've got. Do we put it on your certificate in a revoked format, or do we put it on hold? Part of the reason that we have that revocation would be that you've left the company. It could be that the CEO's computer has been compromised. Let's revoke his certificate. Then let's go ahead and generate a new certificate. There's really two places we can place the certificate. For many, many years, the only place we could place it is in the CRL, Certificate Revocation List. So on the Microsoft system, when you go in and say, I want to revoke a certificate, by default, it's got its own location of where it puts that information. When you come in to the certificate authority, you say, hey, I just want to validate and verify that this is Eric's certificate. So you can ask for my certificate, or it can come back and it would say, you know what, his certificate expired yesterday. So his certificate's sitting in the CRL. Now, you didn't have to go to the certificate authority to find this information out. If the company chooses to actually publish this online, we have the OCSP, which is the Online Certificate Status Protocol. This is a much easier way for you to validate and verify that my certificate is still valid and to get a copy of my public key. So you can actually go out to the OCSP, the Online Certificate Status Protocol, go online and say, I'd like to find out if Eric's certificate is still good. Oh no, it was invalidated yesterday. Boom, bummer. So yeah, that's one place you can go to make it easier for your employees to find certificates, is to set this up online. Key pinning. The browser is going to publish pin keys of high traffic sites. If you're going out to a site a lot, we can actually get that site to actually provide that pinning for us that says, yes, this is actually us, and this is validating and verifying that we are who we say we are. Many times when I go online at a hotel, I have a couple things up on my laptop that are already set up to go ahead and jump to those sites immediately. So I've already set this up, and many times when I get to a hotel, if I haven't authenticated to the hotel's access point yet, I'll get these messages that pop up and go, this is not a secure site. You should not go to this. It's because the key pinning isn't established yet, and it's because I'm not validated and verified through that web page of the hotels first. One of the reasons hotels do this is because they want to validate and verify that you are who you say you are, but they also want to make sure they're not sending bogus websites down to you, because some people will actually go out and make a bogus website. So instead of going out to www.amazon.com, they're going to go in and misspell Amazon and throw that up on your screen and try to get you to go to that page. If I can go to that page and look at something to buy something and they can steal my credit card information, they will do that. So pinning is actually telling us that this is in fact Amazon. So it's going to come back and tell me, yes, this is actually that web page. Dynamic pinning is using the IETF standards to provide that public key pinning back down to us. So it's checking against every subsequent contact. Every time I go back out there, it verifies and validates that this is the web page I'm going to. So key pinning is very good for validating and verifying that that is the proper web page that you want to go to. When we think about those private keys, we think about backing this up along with the system. So if I've got my public key stored on my system, my private key stored on my system, this is what I want to be able to do. I want to make sure that it is being backed up to some location, but I do not want to include it with all my other backups, because that means that if I'm backing this up with everything else I'm doing, then somebody else could see my private key. I want to keep my private key private. So one of the things I could do is I could create a directory on my system, and I could encrypt that directory. So I could keep my private key inside of there. We always think about the compromise, backing up the keys somewhere else in case something were to happen to me, or I was unable to retrieve it from my system. The system crashed, the hard drive crashed, the system got damaged and I can't get into it. Oh man, I'm going to need those keys. So it's always a good thing to start thinking about where I can store my keys. So they have something called an escrow service. What is an escrow service? It's a third party to hold my keys. Is that a very expensive thing to do? Not really. Probably going to cost you about $30 a year to do something like this. So a good friend of mine, Dave, filed his taxes. He's supposed to get $1,200 back from the IRS. But instead, they sent him a check for $120,000. Emily, what are you going to do when the IRS sends you $120,000 when you only asked for $1,200 back? That's exactly what Dave did. Dave picked up the phone, he called the IRS, and he said, you know what, you sent me a check for the wrong amount. What did the IRS say? We don't make mistakes. And Dave knew the time would come when the IRS would be knocking on his door asking for their money back. So he called me up and he goes, what do I do? I said, hire an attorney, man. So he went and found an attorney. What did the attorney do? He didn't call the IRS.
Put it into a certificate of deposit and then you collect interest.
Very close. They found a escrow service. Dave and the attorney went down to the escrow service, put it in there, and they got some interest. They put in a 30-day CD. The attorney sent a letter to the IRS that says, you guys have 30 days within which to come claim your money. 30 days came and went. They didn't show. What did Dave and his attorney do? They went to the bank and they took out the money, and Dave paid his attorney an hourly fee instead of a percentage. 5 days later, Dave and his attorney get a subpoena to go where? Court. To go to court. So Dave and his attorney show up. The attorney from the IRS shows up. What does the judge say to the attorney from the IRS? Mr. Attorney from the IRS, would you please approach the bench and stand in front of me? And he looked at him and he said, what is your problem? You had 30 days. In any court in America, 30 days is all you're ever required to give notice to. You were given your 30 days. You waited 35 days. Step back. Money goes to Dave and his attorney. Case dismissed. Oh, the story's not over yet. 1 month later, 3 audits went out. To whom? The attorney, Dave, and the judge. The judge is not allowed to preside over his own case. So they brought in the district judge to handle this. So the district judge is sitting there. Dave, his attorney, and the judge are sitting on this side, and now the attorney for the IRS is sitting over here. Now this is the district judge that's the boss of this guy over here. So the district judge said, Mr. IRS attorney, would you please come and approach the bench? So he comes up and he approaches the bench and he says, you know, it is illegal for you guys to turn around and slap somebody when you didn't get your way. So this is illegal. So bailiff, would you please take him into custody? Would you please put him in jail, which is where he's going to sit until he removes the audits from these three gentlemen over here. Guy sat there for 2 hours before he finally went, you know what? I think I can go ahead and remove those audits. So Dave, his attorney, and the judge will no longer be audited unless it's something egregious that they have done. So yeah, it was really funny. Dave got to keep the money, but he did have to pay taxes on that whole $120,000. They got a good portion of it back, yeah, because that took him up to the next bracket, which 35% of that went back to the IRS. But it gave he and his wife enough money to buy a Harley, so he was happy. So then the next year she bought one. So they've now quit their jobs and they're just traveling around the country, seeing the country on their Harleys. So I get emails and photos from them all the time. Guess where we are? Grand Tetons. Okay, great pictures. Yes, wonderful. So you start thinking about those keys, who's got them. When you think about an escrow service, this is where you've got a third party who's going to be holding your information. You have to tell that third party who you want to have access to that should something happen to you or someone else. So again, for upper management team, we want to make sure that third party is going to be the attorneys for the company. Okay, we got a couple questions here for you. What is true of digital signatures but not true, a digital certificate but not true of digital signatures? So it's got a starting and ending date. And it proves the authenticity of the person or the system, also known as the security principle. What defines an EV certificate? Extended validation. If we're going to extend this, we need a stricter identifying verification process for your applications. What is generally seen as the most modern and flexible way to find out if a certificate has been revoked? OCSP, the Online Certificate Status Protocol. So it can save network resources compared to the CRL or Certificate Revocation List. Your employer demands a copy of all private keys used on devices you use for work, since regulatory requirements require them to be able to decrypt any official communication when legally requested. They didn't put a question in here. Where would you store that? Key escrow. What certificate format commonly uses Web of Trust model? It is the OpenPGP. So unlike the X.509, the OpenPGP certificates can either be issued by a CA or part of the Web of Trust. What certificate encoding is intended for use in secure emails? I think I heard PEM back there. Yes, PEM is correct. An attacker's gotten a fraudulent certificate attesting to be from your bank, is planning to intercept your transactions in a man-in-the-middle attack. The certificate has not been revoked yet, but what technology could still let you know that something is wrong? Pinning. Because remember, pinning is coming from the manufacturer saying this is a valid or not a valid certificate. So in this chapter, we took a look at several different types of cryptography. We looked at modern cryptography, symmetric, asymmetric ciphers, hashes, and steganography. We also took a look at how the different types are used together for tasks one could not perform alone, such as key exchange and digital signatures. We also then took a look at how digital certificates are created, used, and revoked as part of your PKI structure. Okay. This next portion, this next chapter, is probably one of the most difficult for most people because this next portion talks about some of the network components that we have. The routers, the switches, the firewalls, the access points. Talks about things like IP addresses, and it talks about network protocols and applications. This for me is the most fun chapter I have because I'm going to draw some diagrams that are probably just going to blow your socks off. So let's jump into it. So let's start off by taking a look at what we have here. So we're going to talk about the OSI model and the TCP/IP model. We'll talk about the data link layer, the network layer, and some non-IP networks. So I need to jump over to the other board over here. So I believe that's the interactive. There we go. Okay. Can anybody tell me what a network is? Group of computers. What are we using this group of computers for? Communication is part of it. What else? What about data? Transferring data. So we look at networks to be able to share resources. So data is one of those resources. What else? Printers, files, applications, programs. All of these things need to be shared. So as we start looking at the reason why we have interconnected all these devices, it's so that we can share our resources. When we take a look at some of the different companies that were out there and protocols that were made because of the companies back when the ARPANET and DARPANET came out. So what was the ARPANET and DARPANET used for? Well, the ARPANET, DARPANET was all for the military because it interconnected not only the military bases, but then also connected out into the different universities and colleges that helped in writing some of the applications that came about. So when the ARPANET and DARPANET finally matured enough, then we ended up calling it the World Wide Web. Some just called it the Internet. Who has touted themselves as the individual who invented the Internet? Al Gore. Why did Al Gore say he invented the Internet? I have just as much right to say that I invented the Internet as Al Gore has for saying he invented the Internet. Because Al Gore was on the committee that gave the funding. He was on the committee up in Congress that gave the funding for the ARPANET and DARPANET. So he said, well, I helped invent the Internet. Well, wait a minute now. My taxes, your taxes went to that as well. So we all invented the Internet, not just Al. What's that? Al used it to build his house. Have you seen his house? When he lost his bid for the White House, he turned a tipper and said, I'd like to remodel the front of the house. What's the front of Al Gore's house now look like? Yes, indeed, it looks like the White House. So when people would come to visit me in Tennessee, I'd go, would you like to go see Dolly Parton's house, which is a mile away, or you want to go 26 miles away and see Al Gore's house that looks like the White House? They all wanted to go see Al Gore's house. I have no idea why that is. I'd rather just go up the road and look at Dolly Parton's house. Anyway, she had some really nice property on the water. So when we think about when the ARPANET and DARPANET came out, they were using IP version 4. What protocol was NetWare using? IPX and SPX. What was Apple using to communicate? Apple Talk. I'm verklempt. I can't breathe. We had Banyan Vines. What was Digital Equipment Corporation using? Something called DECnet. So at the time, all of these protocols were out. The International Standards Organization, International Organization of Standardization, was tasked with coming up with one model that described how all of these different protocols worked. So let me introduce you to the OSI model. There are 7 layers to the OSI model. The easy way to remember it, all people seem to need data processing. These are just the first letters of all the different parts to this. You could start at the bottom and say what most people say, which is please do not throw sausage pizza away. Somebody came up with something about throwing Sarah Palin away as well, but I can't remember what that one was. So let's start at the very top. What does the A stand for at the very top? Application. When we take a look at the application layer of the OSI model, we have to think about our end users. We think about that computer system that they have and the fact that when that screen pops up, we have a whole bunch of applications or icons that they're looking at. If one of our employees wants to go out to an FTP site, do we want them rummaging through to try to find where the FTP site is, or do we just want to put an icon on the desktop to make it transparent and easy for them? Your head is about to pop off like a bobblehead. Yes, why? Why do we want it transparent to the end user? Easy for them, easy for us as network administrators, and we don't want them rummaging through my entire network because they might find something and go, oh, look, let's go. I don't like this about me. Let me go ahead and dispose of this. So we got to be very careful about what they have access to. When we take a look at the application layer, I can just call this my user interaction. What does the P stand for? I have the greatest opportunity in the world of getting to travel all over the world and see all sorts of things I never thought I'd get the opportunity to see. And I usually take a couple cameras with me. So when I take pictures of things around the world and I want to send you a photo, what format is that picture in that comes out of my Nikon camera? It's a JPEG. So when I give you this, you can look at it and go, oh, it's a picture. Let me go ahead and bring that picture up. It's a JPEG. Look at this. So when we take a look at the presentation layer, what we're looking at is a uniform format of data. So when I'm presenting this to you, you'll be able to actually see this data. That's an R. So up on my desk, up front, I have a laptop. The laptop stores information in an ASCII format. If I'm going to connect my laptop to a mainframe, mainframe looks at data in the EBCDIC format. So somewhere I'm going to have to translate this from ASCII to EBCDIC to get it up to the mainframe. The mainframe's going to have to send it to me in EBCDIC, and we have to translate it back to ASCII. This is all done at the presentation layer. What does the S stand for? Session. On behalf of the 250,000 computer instructors in the world, I'd like to apologize to you for the way some of our authors write their books, especially when they get to the session layer. Because they define the word session with the word session. What is wrong with these people? Because to me, that doesn't tell me what's going on. A session is a connection. That's all it is. So we are here to establish, maintain, and terminate a connection. Okay, so over here I've got a box. This is my server. I want this to be a web server, an unsecured web server. What port number will you come in on? Port 80 if I want it to be a secured server. Port 443 if I want to also use this as a mail server. What port number? 25. Well, what if I decided I wanted to be a POP3 server? Port 110. How about an IMAP server? 143. Very good. I got one box that's connected, got 5, I think we talked 6 different connections. So each one of these is establishing another session to the same one address because we're using different port numbers. How many port numbers do I have out there that are available to me? A lot. If I said I'm going to give you a raise, you're going to come back and say, I just want a lot. For a couple people, a lot might be $3 an hour. Some others might be $3 a month. Others, it might be $3 a year. A lot depends on who you are. So a good specific number for the number of ports we have would be better. How about 65,536? Does that mean that my system can have 65,536 conversations going at once? Not really. I'm going to run out of something first before I run out of port numbers. What am I going to run out of? Not processing. RAM, yes. So I'm going to run out of RAM long before I run out of the processor capabilities because processors nowadays can do such multitasking, it's ridiculous. But the other part of this would be I'm going to run out of RAM. When we take a look at the session layer, what we are looking at is a connection. So we want to establish, maintain, and terminate a connection. What does the T stand for? We have 2 transport protocols. What are they? TCP and UDP. What's the difference? With TCP and UDP, we talked a little bit about this yesterday. TCP is mainly used for data, and if we drop a packet, we can always resend that packet. With UDP, it's streaming audio, streaming video. Things like phone calls are going to use UDP. Why? Because if you and I are, Bill, if you and I are in the middle of a conversation, and it starts up, do you want to resend that? What are you going to say if it starts to break up?
Say that again.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that, please? So when you think about a conversation going on over a phone, excuse me, we don't want to repeat that conversation. We don't want to resend what might have been disrupted. We're just going to simply go, hey, I didn't understand that. Would you mind repeating that? So when we take a look at TCP, it's usually used for data, but it's guaranteed delivery because if we drop a packet, we'll go ahead and resend it. So this is guaranteed delivery. Whereas UDP, we call it best effort. Sometimes they just call it fire and forget. Let's go ahead and send this out and hope you get it. Kind of like sending a postcard to somebody when you're on vacation. Why do we send postcards to people when we're on vacation? What's that? You never do? You are a good man. What's that? Most people send postcards because they want to kind of gloat where they are. Hey, I'm here and you're not. I don't send the postcard. I come back to the office when they sent me out to Hawaii to teach a class, so I got a whole bunch of calendars and a whole bunch of postcards, and I said, guys, these are here. If you want to take a picture of this and put this up in your office. So as I go around our new offices, because we just rebuilt our offices, it's great to see the calendars hanging in people's offices, because I look at it and go, God, I wish I was there right now. I know I'm going to get back there, but that's okay. So I'm going to move off to the next screen, because then I'm going to come back to this one. So let's talk about TCP, because TCP has a three-way handshake here. So let's take a look at the TCP three-way handshake. So I've got a host over here. So I got host A. And over here I've got an FTP server. So we talked about in the OSI model over here, we said at the application we've got the user interaction. So I'm going to put an icon up on the desktop that says FTP server. So the end user is going to click on that, and then it's going to say we've got TIFF files, we've got JPEG, and they go, oh, I want to see this picture that Eric took of Hawaii. So let's go to the JPEG directory. So they're going to select how they want the data presented to them, and now we're going to start the establishment of this connection. So what I'm going to end up doing here is, oh, we've got blue, I love this. Okay, so what I'm going to do from host A is I'm going to go ahead and send, come on, go, there we go, a packet across, because I'm establishing, I want to connect to you. So I'm going to be flipping the synchronization bit. What are you sending back? An acknowledgement, yeah, I received this, and I'm also sending a synchronization bit in this direction. Okay. Once host A has received this, they're going to say, yeah, I want to go ahead and respond to this. So here is your acknowledgement going back in the other direction. At this moment, this is known as an embryonic connection. Why is the embryonic connection so important to us? I was over in Nashville, Tennessee, teaching a class on firewalls, and one of my students was from the base that's just north of Clarksville there. It's where the 101st Airborne's from. Fort Campbell, thank you. So one of my students in the class was from Fort Campbell, and he was telling me that his firewall, every person coming in on base has to go through his firewall to get on base, to get onto the computers on base. He said by default the embryonic counter on his firewall was set for 700. And in the morning, they have roughly 18 to 25,000 people coming in every morning going through his firewall. So as people are coming into the embryonic connection that's in the firewall, there's a buffer in there. So as we can hold 700 connections in here, if connection number 1 comes in and it doesn't complete the three-way handshake when 701 comes in, what happens to number 1? They get bumped out. Where do they go? To the very back of the line, they get to start over again. So my student was telling me, on a daily basis, I have 25 to 30 people calling me asking, why did I get kicked out and brought back in again and again? It's because his embryonic counter, or embryonic buffer that's in there, was too small. So he had to make it bigger. And he said, how big do I make it? I have no idea. I've never been in a situation where I've been on a base where you have that many people coming through that device to get on to base. So he came back later and he said, I took it up to 1,200 and I get probably 1 call a month. He said, as long as it's not the base commandant, I'm okay. I'm not going to lose my job. So that embryonic connection becomes important to us because we move from embryonic connection into a full connection. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go and send over my first packet. Oop, sorry. First packet's going in the opposite direction. So they're going to now push down packet number 1 to me. What am I sending back? I'm going to send back an acknowledgement. What packet do I want sent next? Packet number 2. So now you're going to send back packet number 2 and packet number 3. What am I sending back? And what pack? I want AC4, which is now send me packet number 4. Okay? So you're now sending 4, 5, and 6. However, I didn't get 5 and I didn't get 6. So what am I sending back? AC5. So I'm saying I received a packet, but you're going to have to start over with number 5. Why? Because we need to complete the three-way handshake. We need to get all of these packets in there. Okay. So now you're going to send back packets number 5, packet number 6, and packet number 7. Now 7 also has the fin flag on this. Fin flag is the final flag that says we are done. That's the last packet. Now as you take a look at this, the first thing that was sent to us was packet 1. Then we got packets 2 and 3. Then we got 4, 5, and 6. Then we got 5, 6, and 7. We've increased the window size. Why are we doing this? Well, you're sending packets to me. I have a buffer on my side. You're going to keep increasing the number of packets that you send me. Every time you send it to me, you might get up to 100 packets, 101, 102, 103, 104. When you hit 104, I can only accept 103. What is that telling you on your side? That you've reached the maximum edge of my buffer. Don't send me more than 103 packets because I can't accept more than that. This is why we have this windowing size increasing, so your side that's sending it to me can determine how big a buffer I have. Does that make sense to everybody? So that windowing size becomes important to us. So I'm going to finally finish this thing out by sending back an acknowledgement. So I'm going to send back the AC, say, hey, we're done, thank you very much, and we are good to go. So that would be your TCP three-way handshake that we have going back and forth. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, let us continue. Yes, sir.
So is this just to test the buffer? You see how big you make the window, or how many packets you can send?
Yeah, we just keep increasing it till we find that limitation, because if you've sent me 100 and I can't accept 100, you'll only send me 99 next time. So it's how we go about determining what that's going to be. Okay, so we are over here on the N. What does N stand for here? Network. The network is looking at the logical address, which is different than the physical address. So this is going to be my IP address. If I were running NetWare, it would be IPX. If I were running Apple environment, it would be Apple Talk. Okay. What's the D stand for? Data link. On the data link, we have two subcategories. We have what is known as the LLC, or the logical link control. And we have the MAC, which is the media access control. Which, if you look at those three letters, MAC, That is your MAC address or the physical address. So this is your physical address or your MAC address. Okay. Now, what is happening here at the LLC? Anybody here ever put a new network interface card into a Windows system? Anybody put anything into a Windows box? What's Windows asking for? The drivers. What do the drivers do? Allow me to interface with that equipment. If I put a new network interface card in, it's looking at a new MAC address. What it wants to do is it wants to do this right here. It wants to link between my IP and my MAC address. We also call it a binding. So I want to bind between my IP and my MAC. So these are being bound together right there. So when you get your new network interface card, you drop it into your Windows system, a window pops up in the driver that says, please choose the logical address. Do you want IP, IPX, or AppleTalk to talk down to this MAC address? Okay, this last one we have down here, I'm going to do it in blue anyway, even though it's blue. What does the P stand for down here? Physical. And in most cases, what we're looking at here is the wire. I can't unplug the wire here. I'll get in trouble. It'll lose my signal. So when we take a look at that wire, what's that connector on the end of this wire? So what? So RG40, it is a RG45 connector. Do you have a special tool to crimp that on there? Why do we need that special tool to crimp that on there? Because we have to hold something inside of that wire. What do we have to hold inside of that wire? We have to hold the bits in there, right? Because we got these bits, these ones and zeros that are just going across my wire. Have you ever taken a pair of wire cutters and you cut the wire, and all of a sudden these ones and zeros come dribbling out the end of the wire? Did you know that you can take the bucket that's in the back of the room, it's called a bit bucket, you can actually put that underneath the wire and you can capture all of those ones and zeros dribbling out of the wire. And you know what's even better is that Cisco will give you with your router or your switch a funnel so you can actually pour those back into the switch or back into the router. I said this in one of my classes. I'm just pulling your leg on this. I said this in one of my classes, and a hand goes up from a lady over on one side, and she goes, I didn't get a funnel with my router or my switch, so what am I supposed to do with the ones and zeros? I'm kidding. Ones and zeros do not go across the wire. What goes across the wire? Could be light if it's a fiber connection. If it's a Cat5 cable, what's going across that wire? Electricity. When the electricity goes across, when it's up, we call it a 1. When it falls, it's a 0. Ones and zeros. Ones and zeros. What do we call ones and zeros? It's known as a bit. What does bit well, before I can ask this question, how many of you have ever watched the Discovery Channel? Okay. Anybody heard of a TV show called The Cash Cab? Do you remember who the comedian is that's on Cash Cab? Do you remember?
I met him too.
You met Ben Bailey and you don't remember his name. You have my permission to smack her on the back of the head because I'm not allowed to hit students anymore.
He's
We frown upon it when I do it too.
yeah,
Okay.
He's technically
Thank you. So Ben Bailey's sitting in the cash cab. What's he say when he pulls up in front of you and he opens the door and you jump in? What happens? Been a while. What happens?
He turns the lights on.
Lights go on, little music goes on, and he says, welcome to the cash cab, and what are you supposed to do between here and your destination? Answer questions. And you get what for it? Money. Easy questions, harder questions, more money, harder questions, even more money. Guy gets in the cash cab. He's going 87 blocks. He gets every question right, including the red light challenge. So when you stop at a red light, he asks you, if you get all the questions right, you get an extra $250. He gets to his final destination. He makes $1,350. What's the question he asks when you get to that final destination? Would you like to go double or nothing? You've just earned $1,350. You've answered every question correctly. What are you going to do? You going double or nothing? You ready for this? You might need Grant's help on this one. You ready? You want the question he got? You got 10 seconds. What does BIT stand for? What is it? Nope. Want to try again? You got 7 seconds. I'm sorry, I'm keeping the $1,350. You did not win the $2,700. We're going to have to take you all the way back to where we started and drop you off. That is not true. That's not what he does. This stands for binary digit. The B comes from the binary and the IT comes from digits. So what's going across our wire is electricity or light. If the light's there, we give it a 1, or if electricity is there, it's a 1. If neither one are there, we give it a 0. We represent things in binary because this is how we store our information, in the form of 1s and 0s. Okay? So what's most important to us in this, besides knowing what's happening at each layer of the OSI model, is something called encapsulation. So let's take a look at encapsulation.
Are we still in the OSI model?
We are still in the OSI model.
Calculation part of the OSI model.
Encapsulation, yes. The first 3 layers of the OSI model are looking at data. To us, this is the most important part of all of this, is the data that we have. As the data moves down to the transport layer, we're going to package this with either a TCP or a UDP header. Why? If you think about sending a package at Christmas time to a family member on the other side of the country, if you want that sent overnight, what's it say on the outside of the box at the post office? It's not priority, that's a 2-day package. It says express. Express is 1 day. Priority is 2 day. What is 3 day? It's called... It's only if you're using Brown. 3 day is also known as first class. I have a friend who works at the post office. I said, wait a minute. You got a first class, which is the 3rd slowest. And above that, you got something faster, and above that, you got something faster. Wouldn't you call the fastest first class, the second fastest second class, and what you call first class should be called third class? She said, shut up, get your mail, and get out. I'm like, whoa, okay. We're going to take this data that we have, we're going to put that label on it that says either TCP or UDP. D, by the way. As we move this on down to the network layer, we're going to take that data that we have that has been encapsulated by the transport layer, and now I'm going to put my source IP and my destination IP. As we move this on down to the data link layer, I will take that data that has been encapsulated by the transport layer and by the network layer. Now I'm going to put in my source and destination MAC. And finally, as we move this down to the physical, this is known as the binary digit. We have special names for the 5 layers of the OSI model. We begin with data. We end with bits. And at the transport layer, we're going to call this a segment. So we move this down to the network layer. Anybody? Packet? Anybody know what it's called when we take this down to the data link layer? It is a frame. And finally, we're going to take this bond down to the bit. Those are the 5 layers of the OSI model. Now the question I have for you is, can you imagine me putting this on a whiteboard that's this high by this? I always tell the people that hire me, that whiteboard is not big. I'm going to go buy one and bring it in and send you the bill for it. Okay, this is the OSI model. So we started looking at the way we encapsulate things, and this becomes really, really, really important to us. We're about to see that in the next slide that I put up. But let's talk about something here. How do you remember segments, packets, frames? Well, it's pretty simple. You were taught this by a lily white kid from California. What happens to me when I go out and it's sunny outside?
Burn.
I burn. What do I put on my body to keep myself from burning? Sunblock is rated in SPF, which does not stand for segments, packets, and frames, but sun protection factor. So that's how I remember SPF, segments, packets, and frames. So we always start with the data, we end with bits, and in between we've got the segments, the packets, and the frames. Okay. So does anybody have any questions about the OSI model here? So the way to really look at this, since I'm still in the blue mode, I'll put it up here on top. We have our data. Outside of this will either be a TCP or UDP header. Outside of this will be my source IP, my destination IP. Outside of this will be my source MAC, my destination MAC, and at the end of this whole thing, I got something called a CRC. What is a CRC?
Oh no.
Cyclic redundancy check. I'm going to ask you that later on in the week, so you better have the answer. Cyclic redundancy check. What we're looking for is a fully intact packet. So at the end, it's basically a checksum that says, yes, this is a fully intact packet. Because if it's not fully intact, what do I want to send back to the other side? I'm sorry, I didn't receive this. Could you send me that again? So I'm going to check the CRC at the end just to make sure that this works. Wait, are you taking a picture of this? One moment, please, before you take the picture. Don't take it yet. Don't take it yet. I had to copyright it. Okay, now you can take your picture.
Yeah, because I would go for that small whiteboard right now.
By the way, the slideshow is available, not the slideshow, but the whole video is available to you for $29.95, is it? That, by the way, is not $29.95. It's $2,995. We've got to make something off of this whole thing. I mean, just to pay for this board, what is this, like $15,000 for this little board over here? I just talked to Alea at the break to ask her if she got the sheet from Curtis. She said she got it, and she said, how are things going? I was trying to come up with a good description, so I had a very long pause, and she went, "Oh, God, no, don't tell me there's problems." And I went, "I don't know that I've ever had such a great room to teach in." I said, "I am not going to let this go away. If you guys don't have a whiteboard like this for me in every class I'm teaching from now on, I'm not showing up." You have spoiled me, sir. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's very nice of you. So if you want a copy of this, you are welcome to get that information. Okay, any questions on the OSI model? And again, you're welcome to take pictures of anything I put up there on the whiteboard. All of the slides and all the things I've done on the whiteboard are still there, so you can just go up even after class and push on that left button and go back and take pictures of all this stuff, because I'm not going to get rid of any of it, okay? Okay, can we move on and talk about how a packet makes its way from one place to another?
Yes.
Okay. More pictures. You're just going, "Oh boy, more pictures."
I know. Did you miss the class? Where's she been this whole time?
That's what I was thinking too.
I'm just gonna start taking pictures.
See, that goes down to, let me break this down.
George W. Bush. He was the president. George Washington. He was also a president.
Next to a freaking IP address, you asshole.
Didn't he miss the?
Okay. Let's walk you through the process of going from a workstation on the left-hand side over to cisco.com. All we want to do is send a ping to www.cisco.com. I just put this whole thing together today in my office, And I want to walk you through what happens as we send a packet from this workstation on the left all the way over to Cisco and see what happens when it brings it back. So a lot of things that happen. If I send a ping to cisco.com and I just put this together, I'm probably going to lose the first 1, 2, or 3 pings. And that has to do with the things that we're about to explore, because we have to build a whole bunch of stuff between here and there. So the first question I have for you is, I got a workstation right here with the address of 1112 and a gateway of 1111. What is a gateway address and what is it pointing to? Yes, sir.
So your gateway address was basically your router and just pointing to the internet.
Well, I got a router. Which router?
Well, the one going to your ISP.
This one right here. Is the 1111 going to be my inside or my outside address? My inside address, right here. Okay. So this is my 1.1.1.1. Now my workstation doesn't know how to get to 1111, so what's it going to do? It's going to send out an ARP broadcast. What was ARP? Address Resolution Protocol. What address do I have and what am I looking for? I've got the IP. I need your MAC address. So I'm sending out the ARP broadcast. Who has 1111? And what they're going to do is they're going to send back the MAC address. So that MAC address is being sent right back here because I did a broadcast out. Every port on the switch, who has 1111? What is the switch going to do with that MAC address? We have the MAC address table. There are 3 things in the MAC address table. I bet one of them is going to be my MAC address. Anything else it might have? Port number. And finally, the VLAN ID. Which VLAN am I in? All that information is going from the switch into the MAC address table. Okay. That MAC address, however, is still coming back down this way, so the MAC is also being sent to me. Why? Because my workstation is building what is known as an ARP table. What's in the ARP table? 2 things. My IP address and my MAC address. Okay? So that's going to be added to this. If you were sitting on a workstation, you wanted to find out what this address was, you could sit down here and you could say ARP with a -A at your IP config. It's going to come back and go, here's your ARP table. Here's the IP, here's the MAC address. Here's how I learned it, either statically or dynamically. Statically says I typed it in, dynamically says I learned it from my switch. Okay. So I want to ping www.cisco.com. Do I know the address of cisco.com? I do not. I don't see an address over there. Where do I get the address from? What's this box? What's DNS do for me? Resolves between IP and MAC. I'm sorry, between the IP and the web page of Cisco. So within my Windows here, I can type in ipconfig/all. It's going to come back and tell me what my DNS address. I go up there, I resolve it, and it goes, hey, cisco.com happens to be 200, 200, 200, 200. Okay? So now I have the address. So we need to fill this in right here. So when we take a look at the TCP or UDP, either one of them are using IP, so IP is using the ping command. What's my source IP going to be? I'm sending the ping from this workstation, so this is my source IP. What's my destination IP? 200, 200, 200, 200. Everybody good with that? IPs are for the long distance. MACs are for my local network. So when I take a look at my local network, what's my source MAC address? It's going to be my workstation right here, correct? What's its destination MAC going to be? This is my local network, so the destination MAC is going to be this guy right here. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay? So you always got to fill this in. We have to know every one of these along the way. So MAC addresses are for local networks. This is for long distance. Okay? Local and long distance. So now we are sitting. Oh, they only give me 3 pens? Really? Okay, we'll go with blue. I was sitting here. I now want to send my traffic right up to the router. Okay? So now I was able to get to here because this was my source MAC, this was my destination MAC, this is my source IP. My destination IP is over there, and this is how I get up here. Anybody here ever flown to another destination? I spent a lot of time at airports. So I went to Guam 19 times. So when I would leave Nashville and go to Houston, when I arrive in Nashville, what's the first thing I look for once I've gone through TSA? A bar, yes. What's the second thing I'm looking for? Depends on what I'm drinking in the bar. I'm looking for the screen. The screen's going to show me up there the terminal, the gate, and the most important thing is the message at the end which says on time or delayed or whatever. So I'm looking for the location, the destination, and then I'm also looking for the terminal and gate number. So when I come into the router, it's doing the same thing. I need to get to what network? 200, 200, 200. How do I get there? Should there be an entry in the routing table? Yes. If you want to get to the 200, 200, 200 network, you're going to go out of S00 through the 2020, 2020. That's all it's going to tell me. If I went to the airport and said, I want to go to Guam, Guam isn't showing up on the board. What's it saying? Here's your hop to get there. Your hop is going to be Houston first. So I got to get to Houston before I can get to Honolulu and then out to Guam or to Narita before going out to Guam. So when I come in here, it's going to say, well, to get there, you got to go here first. So when I'm sitting here, I'm going to say, okay, I got to get to the 2020, 2020, but my source IP is still this guy. My destination IP is that guy. What's my source and destination MAC? It used to be this and this. But now I've moved up to this local network. Does that make sense to everybody? So this router is going to sit there and say, who has 2020, 2020? And what is 2020, 2020 going to send back? Here's my MAC address. What's my router going to do with the MAC address? It's going to build an ARP table. What's in the ARP table? IP and MAC. So I've got my IP and my MAC. It now tells me what the MAC address is here. I know what my MAC address is here. So my source MAC is here. My destination MAC is here. My source IP is here. My destination IP is here. We got all the information. Can I now move from this router to here? I can. So now I get to my ISP and I say I want to get to the 200, 200, 200 network. So what is my ISP going to say? Oh, well, to get there, you're going to have to go out of serial 01 to the 30, 30, 30, 30. So I'm now going to say, who has 30, 30, 30, 30? What is this guy going to send back? MAC. Here is my MAC address. What is my ISP going to do with that MAC? It's going to build an ARP table. You got that one down, so I got IP and MAC in this thing. So I now have, this is my source MAC. I now have this now as my destination MAC. This is my source IP. This is my destination IP. Can I now move from here down to this router? There we go. Whew, we're on the last stage of this thing. So now I'm sitting on my last router and I say I need to get to the 200, 200, 200, 200. I look in my routing table and it says it is out FA00. It's out there somewhere. But I don't know where. So what must my router send out to the switch? Who has 200, 200, 200, 200? What is Cisco.com going to do with that request? It's sending what up here? Stephen? My MAC. What is my switch going to do with the MAC? No. Building the MAC address table. We got you. we always got to make sure that we're building the MAC address table. You got an 80%. Unfortunately, to pass the test, it's 81%, my friend. Oh! No, actually, it is 80%. We're good. So once it sends its MAC up here, we're going to go ahead and build that ARP table again. Wow, it takes a lot just to get from there to here, doesn't it? Aren't you glad we aren't doing a voice over IP? In voice over IP, I decided when I was up in, I was doing a class for John Deere, you guys that make the little tractors and whatnot. I was hoping they'd give me a tractor at the end of the whole thing. They gave me a coupon for $10 off. Really? $10 off on a $4,000 lawnmower. Come on, really? So with voice over IP, I actually used Wireshark to capture everything going across the wire. We used 12 different protocols to actually build the connection from this phone to this phone. And then all of a sudden they started dropping out like flies. Boom, 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 boom. We're down to 3 protocols. One going this way, one going this way, and a control protocol between them. And I went, wow. You went from all of this just down to a very simple connection, which is the same connection we've used for the last 100 years for phones. Okay. Now we can send our traffic all the way down to here. So this is why when we send traffic from one location over to the other, it takes a long time to get there. And we get a bunch of timeouts, timeouts, timeouts from the ping. Now we only built the network going from the workstation on the left over to Cisco. We have not brought the traffic back yet. So we've got the echo request coming down to this box. We have not brought it back yet. Okay. So if you want to take a picture of it, feel free. I love the fact that it has different colors, because if this was all in black, it would be very difficult to see this stuff. Okay? Does anybody have any questions about what we need to build all this? So you've seen why we have ARP, why we need ARP, or Address Resolution Protocol. So ARP says, I've got your IP, but I need your MAC. If it was RARP, it would be reverse ARP. I've got your MAC, but I need your IP. So that would be the other way that we can look at this. So we are building our ARP tables going around. Again, my switch is building the MAC address table so it knows what your MAC address is, what your port number is, and what your VLAN. This way it knows how to send the traffic through the switch. So the switches look at layer 2 traffic, which is MAC address traffic. What does the router look at? Layer 3 or network address. Off the inside here, I've got the 111 network. On the outside over here, I've got the 20-20-20 network. When I look at this IP over here, I got the 30-30-30 network, and then down here I've got the 200-200. So we're using the router to route between the 200 network and the 30 network. We're using this router to route between the 30 network and the 20 network. We're using this router to route between the 20 and the 1 network. Does that make sense to everybody? So routers run at layer 3, switches run at layer 2, or the MAC addresses. Okay? Whew. With that being said, it's lunchtime.